Hi, my name is Tom Cutter. I had the opportunity to hear Aaron Williams give his testimony at FCA, which stands for Fellowship of Christian Athletes. I was amazed by Aaron's testimony, and I asked him if I could interview him to get this testimony out to the public so other people could hear how God had changed his life for the better. And so here's that interview. Enjoy. All right, Aaron, thanks again for coming out again for this interview.
Yeah.
If you could start just kind of telling me about your upbringing and your faith just as a kid.
Okay. Well, my name is Aaron Williams. I'm 36, married with 4 kids. I grew up, in a sense, going to church, but never having a real, true relationship with the Lord. It was more of a, hey, let's go to church, check a box type thing. Say we went on Sunday, and that was pretty much it.
Okay. And then I know you went through a lot of hard times early on. If you kind of walk us through some of the things that happened when you were younger, some of the adversity that you went through.
Yeah. So around the time that I was 7, my parents went through a pretty bitter divorce, and it was pretty crazy to the point where as they were arguing back and forth, whoever was yelling at the other one, I would kind of run from person to person and jump in their arms. It was pretty traumatic for me and my sister just kind of seeing it. Around the time that I was 10, I was diagnosed with alopecia, which is an autoimmune disease that prevents you from growing hair. And so just to kind of give an example, it's when I would take my football helmet off after practices or games, there would just be clumps of hair that would fall out. And families or parents would tell the coaches, hey, you know, either he leaves the team or we'll take our kids off the team. So it was pretty difficult to deal with that. When I was around 12, I dealt with molestation. It was that was pretty impactful, but at the same time, it was the fact that people didn't believe because of the person that did it had their own daytime TV show. And so nobody really believed me. And it wasn't until years later that I ran into the wife, and she said that he was in prison because he had been caught doing the same thing to other kids. So over those periods from that time till almost a freshman in high school, I dealt with that where I couldn't go to my parents because they were too busy arguing with each other. I was dealing with, obviously kids making fun of me and, not understanding, and I'm not understanding the disease that I have. And then not only that, really mad at the world that nobody's believing me when I'm telling them that I'm being taken advantage of. So dealing with all of that and going into high school, I was really mad at the world. And I had a friend who we, kind of confided in each other a lot. It was one of my best friends. And when he was 16, he was shot and killed over a girl. And then that's what kind of really started my downward spiral into like drugs and alcohol. And it just really affected my life because the one person that I knew I could go to talk to about stuff was obviously no longer around. So that pretty impactful.
Mm-hmm. And so take us through, I guess, kind of high school and some of the events that happened then. I know you're really into baseball, so tell us about how you got into baseball and how that impacted you as well.
Well, as a child, I grew up playing baseball, basketball, football. I was actually running cross country and playing baseball when everything started happening in high school. But it got to the point that I started going in this downward spiral that it really affected me at the school. It really affected me with my relationship with my teachers, with my parents, with coaches, and to the point where I was eventually asked not to come back to the baseball team, not to come back to cross country. And that was actually in a way even worse because the only reason I was really going to school was sports, literally for sports. But once I realized, hey, I'm not playing sports anymore, I just kind of really started skipping school, stopped really paying any attention, doing homework and stuff, and eventually was always fighting with people. So eventually I was kicked out of school at 17, which is crazy because I was a senior and I only had one semester left to graduate and really kind of threw that away. But at that time, like I said, my relationship with my parents were bad as well, and my mother kicked me out of the house when I was 17. So at the age of 17, I was living on the streets, out of my car, out of hotel rooms. I even stayed for a little bit on a friend of mine's boat on Lake Lanier just to kind of, just on a downward spiral with drugs and alcohol.
Mm-hmm. And So kind of as you're going through that tough time, and as you said, you quit school a semester away from graduating, and so you couldn't see far ahead of you at all. You're just kind of living in the moment and making poor choices and stuff. But just kind of tell us, where was that low? Where was the rock bottom when you were going through all of that stuff?
Well, it got to the point that since I was no longer going to school, all the connections that I had, the friends that I hung out with, it really it started deteriorating, the relationships, because I didn't see them as often. And it just got to a point one night where I felt alone. I felt like I couldn't go to my parents. I felt like I could not go to the friends because they were all out doing their thing. And so one night I was tired of it all. I was tired of drinking. I was tired of smoking. I was just tired of just living the life that I was living, of, stealing, lying, fighting. I was just tired of it. So I scrounged up as much money as I could, went and rented a hotel room with the intent to take my life. And I remember sitting there, even just now, I remember the steel of the knife on my neck. But it was just a godsend that I found in the dresser next to the bed. There was one of those Bibles that they usually have at the hotels and stuff. And so I just started reading it, and I didn't know what I was reading. Yes, in my mind I was going, okay, I was brought up going to church. This is my last ditch effort. I'm gonna, I was screaming, I was crying out to God. It was a literal arguing match that I felt that I was having. And I just kept saying, nobody cares about me. I'm all alone. Why would you leave me here? Why would you let me go through all this stuff? And I felt enough peace to get me through that night. I wish I could say that was the night that my life changed, but it really wasn't. It was just a pivotal time in my life. There was a family that came not too long after that came around and took me off the streets. They offered me a place to live at their house. They helped me get a job. They helped me get my GED. They helped me get into college. They paid off my credit and actually ended up helping me find a place to live. Their only caveat with that was, hey, you're going to go to church with us. If you're gonna be here, we're gonna help you out, but we're gonna show you why we're doing this.
Do you consider that an answer to, I guess, your conversation with God that night in that hotel room? You're seeking help. You're mad. You're frustrated, and then this family comes along, who didn't have to do what they did.
Oh yeah,
obviously,
absolutely. It was not only was it an answer for that night, but all the other nights where there were times, I know when I look back at it now, where the Lord was trying to use people, but I would push them away. It was not my time, and I was too busy trying to do it on my time instead of His timing. And but yes, it was a godsend, because they've taught me so much. They're actually still very involved in my life to this day. I go talk to them all the time in reference to just ministry and just the way I'm going in not only my education, but as well as corporate. And not to mention, when my wife and I got baptized back in 2014 together, they were there. My family wasn't, but they were there. So that support system, it wasn't, hey, we're going to help you out just right now. It was, no, we're here for the long run. And you could really see that they were Jesus with skin on. Right.
Is that your, I guess, first real experience with that type of love, the love that God has for us? Like going, you saw it in that family, I guess?
Oh, absolutely. And not to put my parents down in any way. I was a hellion. It's the decisions I made, the things I put them through, and the fact that my mother was a single mother, and it just, that whole atmosphere, it was a lot of it was decisions I made. But the fact that they were able to withstand, and they had biblical principles that would teach them how to handle my outbursts and my issues, and then show me, hey, this is wrong, this is why it's wrong, and here's what you should do. And so not only did they show me love, but they taught me how to receive it and to share it with others. One of the things my pastor says all the time that I share with people is that we want to be a river, not a lake, because with a lake, things are poured into it and just stay there. With a river, it pours in and it keeps flowing. And I want to take that love, and that's what they've shown me, is that, hey, you take the love that Jesus pours into us and we pass it on to everybody. It flows through us. It's not supposed to just come to us and stay here. But yeah, that was my first experience with real love.
Okay. Now tell me how, like you obviously started getting some positive momentum, making good choices, and they were assisting you in these things. But tell me, how did you meet your wife and starting a family? How did all that go?
Okay. Well, I was actually at Truett McConnell College at the time, and I was actually, funny story, dating a Colombian exchange student. And she wanted to go hang out at a Spanish spot, and I didn't know any Spanish spots. And so I called a friend of mine that I played football with back before high school. And he said, hey, he was Spanish. He said, hey, we're going to go out, come meet us. So we went down there to meet him. And I was sitting in the car talking to him. And a young lady leaned into the car and was talking to him. And when she walked away, I said, who was that? And he said, my cousin. I said, well, I'm going to marry her. And that was in 2003. And 3 years later, we got married. It was 3 years of me chasing her, but but we did get married. And it was very interesting. Being, like I mentioned, she is Spanish. She's from Guatemala. And it was very interesting, especially on the religious front, because at this point, I am attending 722 at North Point, which is a college ministry with Louis Giglio and Andy Stanley. And she grew up with her mom being Catholic, her dad being Mormon. So when we got together, it was very difficult to find a church and to just agree on religion in general. But we not only that, being that we didn't have a church home to go to, because North Point wasn't her place and her places were not my place. We just couldn't agree. So it got to the point where we just stopped going. And over that time, we ended up having 4 children, or actually 3 during that time. And it got to the point where where divorce papers were on the table pretty much. And we found Victory, which is the church we go to now in Hamilton Mill. And it was just a church where we both kind of found, something that spoke to both of us. And what was great about it was that it brought both of us together. It helped us to put everything behind us and start new and look forward and focus not on the things of the past. Because, I was still holding on to my issues with my family and everything that my upbringing. Even though I was following the Lord, I was still dealing with that. I was still holding on to it. And she was holding on to obviously all of her, things from her upbringing. And it helped us to put those to the side and learn to have grace with each other, to be humble, to serve each other. And so we learned to start out-serving each other. So in 2014, like I mentioned, we both got baptized together, whereas in 2006 was when we first got together. And so from 2006 to 2014, we couldn't find a church. We were just pretty much moving as far away as we could from God, but he brought us back.
That's great. So you mentioned carrying stuff with you, maybe baggage from the past and stuff like that. And then I'm sure that every person handles that differently, but how did you personally let go of these things from the past that you were carrying with you that was affecting your life at that time? How did you deal with that to be able to leave stuff behind you?
Well, I was mad at the world. So I had to learn who I was, whose I was, and the potential that I had inside of me. I'd been beat down so many times. The world would just, at every turn, was trying to pull me down, hold me down. And what I learned was that I was just mad that things were not going my way. And I had to come to the realization that, things are going to happen. They're not always going to go your way. When you think of like storms and stuff, I felt like it was seasons of storms. To me, it was a monsoon season because it was just continuous. It was nonstop. But I looked at it like, instead of praying that there would be no rain, it was me praying that, hey, Jesus, be my umbrella when there is rain. Because he never said, hey, you're not going to go through trials and tribulations. In fact, he says you are. But he also says, I will be with you. So he says, be strong, be courageous, and know that the Lord your God will be with you in everything you do. So it helped me to be able to say, hey, this happened, but it doesn't define me. And I can continue to move forward and use that going forward.
Right. And if you can, share with us the adversity that you and your wife have dealt with just a couple of years ago. So in 3 years ago, 2016, our 5-year-old daughter passed away from an asthma attack. And it was one of the most difficult things I've ever dealt with. I mean, even now when I talk about it, I still get a little bit just feelings come back, because
it was not so much that it happened. It was that, my children were standing right there when she passed right in front of them. It was very traumatic to us all. But, in the Bible where it says peace that surpasses all understanding, we had that and we've had it since. I couldn't explain it. One thing that somebody told us at the funeral was, hey, you can, during times like this, you can either come closer to God or you can go farther away from God. But just know that He's there. And if you dig into Him, He's going to dig into you. And it's been very evident. And it's with my daughter, she was really Jesus with skin on. She was only 5 years old, but she had over, they stopped counting at 350 people coming to her funeral. I don't even know 350 people. So I don't know how they all came, but they just stopped counting at that. But we used that opportunity to tell people that, hey, yes, storms are going to come, things are going to happen. But the Lord He tells you that He's going to be with you, and that there's something to learn in everything. Just like I was mentioning earlier about the rain, like a flower. Flowers need rain and sunshine. They can't just have the sunshine all the time because they'll shrivel up. They have to have that rain. That's part of the growing process. It's the same thing with us. We don't want it, and I don't wish it for anybody, but we have to go through those rain storms sometime in order for us to grow. So I use those opportunities. My wife uses those opportunities to see what can we learn? What is the Lord telling us right here, right now, in this situation that not only we can use, but others can use and learn from it as well.
Yeah. So Aaron, listening to your story, I'm imagining you in that hotel room, and it almost ended that night. And your story would have been a sad story because there was mostly just negative things that happened in your life. And since that time until now, you have a beautiful family and you're serving God with the things that you do. I'm just so thankful that you chose to live on and to live for the Lord. Tell us what you're doing to serve the Lord in your daily life now.
Okay. So about a year after my daughter passed, I was praying and fasting and just trying to figure out what I wanted to do with my life. I just felt like I came to the realization life really is short. And being that she was 5 and her life was taken at that time, I was like, what am I doing now to impact this world? And so I was praying on it, and I felt the Lord tell me, take your 2 passions, sports and ministry. Now, it wasn't Him, a booming voice or anything. It's just I felt it in my spirit. And I didn't know what that meant. And so I talked to a couple people in the men's groups and stuff and just tried to figure out, hey, do I need to go get a chaplaincy? Should I go into sports chaplain? What should I do? And somebody came up and said, hey, I've got somebody I want you to meet, an organization that you should maybe be a part of. It might be down the path you're wanting to go. And so I met with the director and he was at Mill Creek, and I was serving with him. It's a sports ministry, kind of character coach / sports ministry at the school and with the athletics. And I served with him for about 2 months, and he came up and said, hey, I'm leaving. And I was kind of like, oh, well, I don't know what to do at this point. He said, oh, no, I feel that you're supposed to be in this position, in the director position. And I said, oh man, I don't have any qualifications for that. And he said, don't worry, I've already told them you already have a meeting with the board of directors and everything. So next day I had a meeting with the board of directors. They asked me, have you worked for a church? No. Do you have a degree in theology or anything like that? And I said, no. Have you worked for FCA or Young Life or anything? And I said, all I've got is my story, and I'm willing to share it and help where I can. And they said, well, we'll talk about it. So they called me the next day, and and I prayed on it, and they said, listen, you don't meet any of the qualifications, anything that we look for, but they said, we've prayed on it, and we feel that the Lord has brought you here and that you need to be here. So for the last going on 3 years, I've been the director of the sports ministry and character coaches at Mill Creek High School. So I'm doing that now. I'm serving in the men's ministry at our church, helping out with their sports ministry. And I also work in hospice, where we're able to help, patients that are dealing with, struggling, or they're struggling with life-threatening illnesses and stuff. So I try to use biblical teachings that I'm learning and be that river that pours into me and I can share it with others.
That's awesome. So working with young high school age kids, do you see similar situations? Like, hopefully kids aren't going through all the struggles that you had to go through, but do you see people still struggling with the same types of things that you struggled with? And if so, what do you tell those kids?
Well, absolutely. Of course, I mean, it's a never-ending cycle. We all go through it. Every generation, they're just at different ways of dealing with it and letting people know. I will tell you, the first thing I do when I first introduce myself to every team every year is I let them know why I'm here. I tell them that story as to, hey, here's what I went through. And I let them know that I'm not here to talk at you or pour anything down there. I'm just to let you know, high school was my hardest, hardest years of my life. And this is what I learned during that. This is what I've learned from it. And I'm here to help you if you're struggling with any of it. And I've dealt with people that are dealing with depression, that are dealing with suicidal thoughts, that are dealing with alcoholism or just dealing with drugs or just promiscuity, just any issues. I mean, I get it almost on a daily basis, whether it's a text or somebody will just come up and say, hey, I'm dealing with this. What's your thoughts? And it's not always a biblical moment. A lot of times it's just, they just want somebody to talk to that's not a coach that determines their playing time, and it's not a parent that's going to get on to them if they're doing something. A lot of times they just want to be able to say, hey, here's what I've been confronted with. What should I do? And sometimes I don't have the words. I just say, hey, here's what I did, or I don't know, but I can pray for you and I'll let you know, I'll look it up and try to give you resources and stuff.
Well, I just want to say that just to have you there in that position to help those kids, I don't think did you have anyone like that during your time?
I did not.
I mean, for them to have someone to reach out to is awesome.
Yeah.
And so anything else that you would like to tell people that might listen to this, that maybe are struggling with difficult things, that maybe they haven't really even entrusted God in their life, or they think that God is just a little too distant and too hard to believe in. But
Yeah.
what would you say to folks that are watching?
Well, I would just tell people that, Joshua 1 says, be strong, be courageous, know that the Lord your God is with you. And I want people to kind of meditate just on that. Just remember that. He tells us to remember, to remind ourselves daily, if that's having to say it over and over and over until you believe it. But he tells you, be strong, be courageous, don't be afraid of anything, because yes, you're going to go through stuff, but he's telling you don't be afraid of it, because he's going to be with you. Yes, you're going to go through stuff, but trust that he's going to be there. And if you take the opportunity to pour into him, I'm not telling you don't cry out to him. Let him know what you're feeling in your heart. Yes, he already knows it before we share it with him, but all he wants is for you to tell him, hey, this is what I'm dealing with, and acknowledge that you're dealing with that, whatever you're dealing with, and he will pour back into you. And so just to not give up, to remember that God loves you.
Okay. Now let me ask you another maybe difficult question, put you on the spot. Let's say somebody doesn't have really a spiritual life, but they want to know more. Mm-hmm. Where would you advise them to, if they had a Bible and they cracked open a Bible, where would you have them start reading first?
Oh man, that is, I know what spoke to me was Job. Just because he dealt with, if it's somebody who is dealing with different difficulties in their lives and they don't know how to handle it, and they don't understand why you would go through it, I think Job would be a perfect spot, because one, he deals with everything from his family being taken, his kids being taken, his business being taken, him getting diseases, his wife and friends turning their backs on him. But one thing he did was said, hey, I came into this world with nothing and I'm leaving with nothing. So everything I have, I'm going to give it to the Lord, because he gave it to me. And I feel like that would be a good spot, especially if somebody's dealing with something, to kind of see, hey, here's how the Lord took somebody who was going through everything and still blessed him through it.
Yeah. Awesome. Well, thank you so much. I appreciate your time.
Yeah, thank you.